completely impromptu mugshots and coffee to share with you with becoming a new friend. Let me give you a few clues. What do they do if they have these around? And a man cave that's all full of this, and his books. Oh my gosh. Yeah. He's got some awesome books you got to check out in here, especially when you start seeing stuff like, right? There's a lot to learn. So I'm just getting to know Jack, and he's telling me all these stories, and one of these, most people don't walk away from.
So experimental aircraft being experimental, and why you've got to make sure you prepare yourself mentally for flying something that may not fly.
This sounds... So when somebody says they have a man cave, you gotta believe Jack's got one. You're a pilot.
I am a pilot. I've been flying for roughly 25 some years. Actually more than that,
but you build airplanes.
I do now.
Pilots that build their own airplanes, is that like doctors that their own
do their own operations?
Yeah.
Yeah, it has some of the same risk associated with it.
But maybe not. Maybe if you built your own car, you'd understand what the brakes do and be able to not be in a collision, right?
Yes, you learn how to fix things, and you're better off if you're going to build airplanes having some mechanical aptitude.
Yeah, I bet. So how do airplanes stay in the air?
Well, basically an airplane, the forces on an airplane are thrust, which moves you forward, drag, which keeps you from going forward, lift, which is created by the wings themselves, and gravity. So
do you need all of those?
The Lord has given you the gravity. So basically what you're doing is optimizing the others so that you actually stay aloft.
Okay. So a wing creates lift as long as it's moving through the air, right?
Yes. And it has a point at which it no longer has lift, and that's when the airplane stops flying.
6:30 in the morning. Now what would Daniel be getting up that early for? Well, Jack's got a surprise for us. We are going up in the air. Yeah, good. So you were flying your own experimental home-built aircraft?
Yes, I had built a airplane. It's a fiberglass airplane that was a kit. And the kit was made by a company called Arion Lightning. And it's largely fiberglass with some carbon fiber components. And you purchase the kit, and then you assemble the kit.
Huh.
And there's some modifications that are required along the way, so it's not like, you know, you're buying a plastic plane model and sticking it all together with glue.
How much do you get to hang out in here, Jack?
Not enough. Although my wife will tell you that I started out my aviation career building plastic airplanes as a middle school kid, and I'm still doing it now. They're just larger scale.
So you had built a...
I built a Lightning, started on it in 2015, late in the year, and I took my time doing it. Most people follow with a kit, maybe what they call the 51% rule that is required for the FAA to agree that this is a valid experimental amateur-built airplane. So,
what's with this?
That is a special polyfiber fabric. And so
fabric, Jack.
Fabric, yes. And
that looks like a drum skin.
Similar in concept. Basically, it's a tubular steel structure and they stretch the fabric and glue it to the ribs and the steel, and then they put clear coats on to seal it.
So it's safe to fly even though it's fabric.
Yeah, well, first airplanes were fabric, right?
Okay.
I probably did about 65% of the work, deducting what the manufacturer, did in presenting the kit to you.
So Jack's telling me he's flying this plane that he built in a hangar, and there was fires coming up on the horizon. What? How'd that go?
So I had completed the plane the year before, and I was taking my time to work out some of the bugs with the airplane. This particular plane had a tendency to roll to the left, and so had done some measurements on wing dihedrals and found out that it was really the angle of inclination of the right wing that was the cause of the problem. So
I think what Jack's saying is it does this, and all your food on your tray spills, right? We don't like that kind of stuff.
Exactly. You can't fly hands off when it's doing that.
Yeah, okay.
So we changed the angle of inclination of the wing by about 1/8 of an inch at the wing spar, which has a lot more impact,
Yeah.
16 feet out, following your basic geometry. And I was testing that new angle of inclination that was on the right wing, and it solved the banking problem. And I was then testing out the new prop pitch arrangement and climbing out of Glendale Airport and heading originally toward Prescott. Well, they had fires up around Prescott, so I changed my route of flight and headed toward an area along Payson, Arizona, but I was climbing up over the mountains in north of Phoenix, and I had an engine loss of power.
Just makes light. An engine loss of power. No motor! And not a glider. Just go, oh, no problem. I'll just fix this thing here, right? No?
Well, it depends on how much time you have. And in this case, in the mountains, you have just a few places that you can land, like virtually none.
Yeah.
But when you fly experimental aircraft, the one thing that's important is you keep reminding yourself to look down and figure out places you might put the airplane down if you have a problem. And in this particular case, I had a problem. Now, I'd had problems with the fuel pump on this airplane before, which caused me to end up replacing that. So I figured at the outset that perhaps it was a fuel management problem. The engine acted like it was dropped to idle, so I figured it might be, in fact, still idling, and the engine instruments led me to believe that was the case, which in retrospect it wasn't. The prop was actually windmilling, or other words, the forward motion through the air was turning the prop, the engine wasn't what was turning the prop.
Sidebar conversations on this whole thing, as Jack and I were talking about earlier, is how often we're wrong, right? What percentage of the time that we're sure we're dead on, we're convinced about things in life, and the lesson to learn is at least half the time we're wrong, right? In this case, you were...
I was absolutely wrong.
100% wrong in the air.
Yeah.
At least you had some speed, though, right?
Yep. So when the outage occurred, I was probably doing around 120 knots. And so recalling that I had a plateau of sorts behind me, I did a 180-degree turn and set the plane up for glide as I'm going through the engine instrumentation, seeing what should happen. Then I did something that I shouldn't have, and that is I spent a minute and roughly 10 seconds trying to contact ATC, and for whatever reason on that day, I was to find out later, the effective communication to ATC had been atmospherically limited. So what I should have done was do an engine restart sequence, which is go back to the known good fuel tank and try to restart the engine. I lost that period of time because now I've got about 2 minutes and change left, and I was in the glide mode, and I headed toward the plateau that I had noticed on, when I was out climbing to the northeast, and set up the plane for normal landing. And unfortunately, I did not have the time to actually do another change of direction to land into the wind, so I now have tailwind, but
and a lot of ground
no
speed.
power. Yeah, that's right, and no power to help me out of this particular situation.
Yeah.
So as I'm, I cut in full flaps coming across the plateau, and I'm about halfway through, and I'm just slowing the plane down, just like pretty much like a normal landing, but still had a little too much energy. And so I came, as I am touching down, I came over the edge of the plateau.
Okay, sorry, I know what that feels like. All of a sudden, oh, there's no place to land anymore.
Yeah.
And you're still moving, right?
Well, I'm still moving. The wheels are now on the ground, and I've got a tree coming up on my left side, and guess what? No way to maneuver a plane that has no power, and the brakes don't really work when you're going down a hill in an aircraft that the brakes are designed for landing on a level surface.
Right.
So as I hit the tree, it tore off the left side of that left wing, and the plane then was sliding across the ground after hitting a rut and losing the landing gear and the prop, and I slid to a stop just short of the dirt road coming up the hill to the plateau.
I just slowed to a stop. I am just imagining, I'm a glider pilot. Anything that wasn't nice and smooth, there was some bouncing involved in this. Had to have been, right?
Certainly, but I think the amount of adrenaline that you have in a situation like that, and I tend to be a fairly calm guy, but I made sure that my fuel tanks were off at that point in time, and flipped open the canopy and jumped out, and frankly just started collecting parts. And there was a guy that had one of those little quads coming up the hill to help me out. And at the same time, I looked up the phone number for the FAA and gave them a call. And a few minutes later, the Phoenix Police Department helicopter was circling about 2 miles away. I figured they'd find me sooner or later. And I called my wife just to let her know that, I'd been in an airplane accident, and I'd give her a call back directly.
So there's a lesson in this for me, I'm sure, but I don't know what it is. So tell me what it is that I should learn.
Well, first off, as a pilot, study your emergency checklists, because you don't know when something that you didn't expect might happen. And can you relate that to life? The answer is absolutely. What you need to do as you encounter different aspects of your life is think about the outcomes that are important to you and what challenges and obstacles you might face along the way, and plan a set of alternatives to deal with those. And then once you run into an obstacle, go redo your plan to make sure that you can avoid making those same mistakes twice. So the next time I get up in my second airplane that I'm building, I make sure that if I in fact have a loss of power, the first thing I'm going to do is do a restart sequence. That's good. I really had a desire to be an Air Force officer and fly jets. Turned out I had 20/40 vision, and that wasn't going to happen, and I really didn't want to be a navigator, so I went in and did the U.S. Army instead. But I didn't lose my interest in aviation, and I started learning how to fly in the 1980s. And then I quickly purchased a Mooney airplane and flew it for 25 years. Then I moved out of the aviation environment for a couple of years and realized that, man, I really like flying. And at the time, I had a small medical issue that I had basically grounded myself. And so I started back into flying via paragliders. And along the way, I found out about something which I think is an outstanding way for a young person to learn how to fly, and that is light sport aircraft. If you can get a driver's license and you can go take pilot training, you can be certified to fly light sport. And one of the big advantages of light sport is that you can progress beyond it and fly a lot faster and higher and fly instrument airplanes, but it is a much more economical way to get into the aviation business. And so go out and seek out an instructor. A lot of instructors nowadays teach in airplanes like this that are special light sport aircraft that is certified by the FAA, so that instructors can train in them, and instructors don't have to charge as much because they're miserly, but they go as fast as a Cessna 150. So I encourage anybody that's interested in aviation to go find out first about light sport, and if you really enjoy it and want to grow, then you can spend just about any amount of money and get in any speed of airplane that you want to focus on and learn how to fly, because each airplane's a little bit different, but the concepts are the same.
Jack is quite the guy, and he's also a very good pilot. I really appreciated flying with him yesterday, and I bet you have some good questions for him. He's got all kinds of corporate experience. He's got all kinds of parenting and marriage experiences. If you'd like to ask him some questions, meet some of the other guys, go to 360men.net and be sure you subscribe down below. You'll get all the notifications of more stories from Jack and other men.